I think it's a good idea to watch this. The only reason being is because Ozempic is so common to be used nowadays. I think that Ozempic should be used when you've reached the point of no return with weight. So the issue with putting weight on is that at some point it becomes severely more difficult to work out if you weigh a certain amount. So like people that weigh over 300 pounds, they can't get on a treadmill. Like their legs cannot support them no more, you know? We shouldn't be using drugs. This is the uncomfortable truth about Ozempic.
Jaro managed to make millions of people lose massive amounts of weight with seemingly only mild side effects. More than 1 in 8
Didn't
US
somebody go blind for using this shit? What do you mean mild side effects? I got this one guy that I worked with. Nicest guy in the world. He's from Wisconsin. Such a nice guy. But he was a bigger boy, right? Another guy from Wisconsin, biggest douchebag in the world I've ever met. He told him, well, why don't you just go on Ozempic? And he said something about like, well, I don't want to go blind. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, that makes you go blind or something. And I was like, oh my God.
only mild side
I never
effects.
fact
More
checked
than 1 in
it,
8
but...
US adults have tried the drugs, and for the first time in history,
See,
the country...
1 in 8. 1 in 8 people have tried Ozempic. I'm not trying to be mean, but there's healthy ways of going about losing weight, and it's uncomfortable. 110%. I would weight loss train in the gym before I'd go on Ozempic, especially weight loss, something so severe. And they kind of just like say, okay, I don't want to work out. Let's do the drugs, you know? And it's like, no. Drugs are not good. Even if they're prescribed, they're not good.
His obesity rate actually fell. At the end
Really?
of 2025,
Okay.
the WHO added GLP-1 drugs to its essential medicines list for diabetics and released guidelines on how to use it for obesity. For the first time ever, we have a medication that reliably, quickly, and seemingly safely can make people lose weight, sometimes massive amounts of weight. But as with most things related to nutrition, health, and weight loss, these medications are controversial. There are many aspects to GLP-1s, but we'll focus on one today, the potential medical revolution these drugs could mean for obesity.
Listen, I'm all for weight loss drugs. I'm all for any drug if there's no severe side effects. Even if it doesn't affect everyone the same way. Like even aspirin and shit, it kills your fucking liver. And that's like the least biggest issue. I mean, if you look at like any other drug that the US government has created or the US has created, they always got side effects.
One of the most deadly chronic diseases of our time that over 1 billion people suffer from and that remains largely unsolved and underfunded. It turns out GLP-1 drugs are the first effective medical treatment for obesity in medical history. The obesity trap. In 2025, more than half of Europeans were either overweight or obese, plus 1 in 3 children. And in many countries like the US, Mexico, Chile, or Saudi Arabia, the numbers are even worse. Today, this kills almost 4 million people each year, and if trends continue, by 2050, 1 in 3 adults on Earth will be obese and half of humanity will be overweight. When hearing the word obese, most people think of the extreme ends of the spectrum, but this is not correct. It's not very helpful that the definition of obese is a bit vague because bodies are pretty different. So it can be a BMI of over 30, your waist to hip ratio, or a body fat percentage of over 25% for men and over 32% for women. In the end, obese is a medical term that doesn't judge how you look, but if you have an unhealthy amount of body fat. How did we get here? For most of our history, food was scarce. So when our ancestors found a calorie bomb, binging on it was the best of ideas. The more sugar, fat, and salt, the better. Our brains are wired to love these foods. They bring pleasure, enjoyment, and mental release. This helped us survive in a world where food was the most important thing to worry about each day. And then the world changed overnight, and suddenly our modern food environment hijacked our biology. Food is a product now and has become cheap, calorie-dense, and hyper-palatable, which means it's been engineered with addictive levels of sugar, fat, and salt, making our reward centers go ballistic with joy.
And they know
About
that.
half of the products in a US grocery store are ultra-processed, and many are labeled in ways that are deeply misleading, like the serving sizes on packs of chips. Marketing strategies like value pricing and constant food ads stimulate us to eat more. So most people overeat regularly, sometimes without even noticing. And this is very subtle. Most people don't get overweight because they massively lack self-control. They just eat a little bit too much over a long period of time. Just a small excess, like the equivalent of half a Snickers over your maintenance calories per day, compounds to almost 5 kilograms or 10 pounds of fat after a year. This is how most people get obese slowly, bit by bit. Since being overweight is also shamed on top of being unhealthy, we try to fix our overeating behavior with all sorts of, well, behavioral methods. The world is filled with diets and healthy habits campaigns, but if we look at the results, just telling people to eat healthier foods and to move more does very little in the real world. Most people gain back most weight they lose during a diet within a year or two, and often gain more afterwards. Often through little fault of their own, because once you do lose weight, your body's also working against you by trying to bring you back to the fat baseline it was used to. Really, the only
you always got a craving, but like when you stop like eating or fighting against it, that's when the craving gets worse. That was the hardest thing with me, is because like I'm skinny, and I won't lie, if I didn't have a good metabolism, I'd be fat. I 100% would be, because I don't exercise and I eat like a motherfucker.
A viable way to do it is a lifestyle change. Not a break from calorie-dense food, but a lifestyle where you eat it only occasionally or not at all. Which is not just very hard, but also feels like saying no to some of the best things in life. Finally, there's simply hunger, a really strong and hard-to-ignore signal from your body. How hungry you are is genetic, so just through bad luck, you may experience a lot of food noise and think about eating a lot. And to make things worse, in many people who get overweight or obese, their hunger signal becomes dysregulated. Not necessarily permanently, but even after losing weight, it can take a long time before your hunger adjusts downwards again. Many eating behaviors, eat now or later, chocolate or vegetables, are actually governed by an orchestra of hormones that are not within your control. You're not hungry in the evening because you decide to be, or because this is when your body needs energy, but because your body releases certain hormones. And it turns out your fat is one of the major regulators of this orchestra. If you're overweight or obese, the excess fat is throwing your hormonal orchestra out of tune. This may make you more hungry or push you to overeat more, creating insulin resistance that causes type 2 diabetes and so on. We made a video if you want details. But there's one specific hormone that plays its tune quietly in the background, even in obese people. The glucagon-like peptide 1, or GLP-1. It's one of the hormones your body releases after a meal. It tells your pancreas to release more insulin to keep blood sugar in check and slows down your digestion to keep food in your stomach. And in your brain, it increases your feeling of fullness and being satisfied, curbing your appetite. These effects are usually modest. Once in your bloodstream, GLP-1 disappears in barely 2 minutes, its song quickly fading away. So one day, scientists had an idea. What if we made artificial copies of GLP-1 that play the same song but louder and much longer? A GLP-1 signal that stays in your body would boost insulin and silence appetite. The first artificial GLP-1 was approved in 2000.
Yo, so what are they using in like G Fuel? Because G Fuel is considered a dietary supplement because it quiets down hunger and stuff. So do they use that same kind of technique? Like, or is that just like just overload you with like vitamins and shit? I've always wondered that.
2005 for diabetes and in 2014 for obesity. But the revolution came with semaglutide and tirzepatide, Ozempic and Mounjaro. Really powerful GLP-1 agonists that play their songs in your bloodstream for up to a week. They send out a loud and steady signal that dials down your appetite 24/7. You still enjoy food, but you feel full and satisfied much sooner, making it easy to not overeat. And since the song never really switches off, you feel less hungry throughout your day, making you eat less often. How intensely you feel hunger is largely genetic, so especially people who suffer from food noise, a constant urge to eat, feel a huge psychological relief from the drug. Finally, their body stops screaming at them. Suddenly, you're dieting without expending willpower, without really thinking about it. It feels magically effortless.
It sounds almost too good to be true. This sounds awesome, especially if it's just natural receptors being, quieted down, but it sounds too good to be true.
By changing your biology, a drug changed your behavior. But, is this a good thing? Miracle drugs. On the weight loss side, these drugs are incredibly effective. In 3 months, you can lose 10% of your initial weight. 3 months later, over 15%. And after a year, you may reach more than 20%, a level of weight loss that used to only really be achievable through bariatric surgery. In other words, GLP-1 drugs make excess weight melt away like nothing before. We can't stress enough at how unhealthy obesity is, causing everything from diabetes to heart attacks and cancer. So the consequences for health are stunning.
I don't think diabetes causes cancer. I think it's what we eat that causes cancer.
Treatment with semaglutide cuts your risk of stroke
Right.
or heart attack by 20%. 17 months of tirzepatide crashes your chances of developing diabetes by 66%. They also reduce sleep apnea, improve kidney and liver function, lower inflammation, cut cancer risk, and may potentially slow Alzheimer's. They might even boost fertility, as obesity often disrupts hormones and increases complications during pregnancy. And there may be more positive long-term effects. Some of these benefits are a direct result of weight loss, but intriguingly, they sometimes occur regardless of how much weight has been lost, and some have been seen in patients who weren't obese to begin with. We don't know why yet, but it seems like turning up the GLP-1 signal is synchronizing the whole metabolic orchestra, restoring a balance between brain, gut, and body. And as if that weren't enough, GLP-1 drugs may also quiet other cravings. They seem to reduce the use of alcohol, nicotine, cannabis, and opioids. Large trials are underway to confirm
Wait,
these effects.
what?
If the results hold, they could become something unprecedented, real anti-addiction drugs. But of course, there are side effects. Most commonly nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and constipation. Not fun, but usually harmless and fleeting for the vast
Yeah, I
majority
was
of
gonna say, that's not that
patients.
bad.
More serious stuff like pancreatitis, kidney problems, or gallbladder disease do happen, but for well under 5% of people.
5% is still a shit ton of people. What? What are they saying, bro? That is a lot of people. He just said, dude, 5% is a lot when he talked about freaking organ failure. That's a lot of people.
So it's pretty risky to take these drugs without medical supervision, and in extreme cases, they can land you in the emergency room. While these drugs are not really that new, since diabetics have been using them for decades, because now millions of people are using them, we might discover new side effects in the coming years. Apart from this, the main downside of GLP-1 drugs may come from their greatest strength, rapid weight loss. If you don't actively check what you eat, taking these drugs is just an unhealthy crash diet. Any steep calorie deficit requires resistance training and plenty of protein, or else you'll lose a lot of muscle along with the fat. That's harmful.
Yeah, and this is also too is once you lose that weight and you get off of the Ozempic, you can't just go back to your normal eating because you'll just gain the weight tenfold. Like he said, they gain the weight and more because they're just feeding themselves even worse than they were before. Use the Ozempic, drop down to a safe weight, and then start exercising, you know? It's like just kind of how I feel
At
about
any
it.
age, but especially after 40, when building muscle gets harder and the risk of falls starts to rise. So, while these drugs change your biology, they don't do all the work for you. Staying healthy still requires you to adopt healthy habits. In the end, the same is true for these drugs as is for any other diet. Without a lifestyle change, you either have to use the drugs forever,
Right.
or you'll probably gain the weight back.
Right.
After about a year, the weight loss slows down and eventually stops in most people. At this point, you usually stop using the medication. If you use that time to change your eating habits, you have a really good chance of keeping the lost weight off. But about
The issue
25%
is-
regain a significant chunk.
I was gonna say the issue is you're giving a easy ticket to people who just want an easy ticket to lose weight. So in my opinion, this is not talking about everyone. Obviously, people are actually using this the correct way. But I feel like a lot of people are saying, okay, this is easy weight loss. Let's do this. We'll look freaking snatched and then we'll continue eating. And they would do it forever. They would use Ozempic forever if they had to, as long as they could look good and eat their food. That's the issue, is that's not what Ozempic's made for.
And some 20% put back on all of it. So, for many, maintaining the results may mean staying on the drug forever. Is this a bad idea?
Yes.
Well, we don't know.
Well,
The
he
newest
just said 5% of people have organ failure. If you have organ failure, you don't want to be on the drug long, okay? Because you don't want to be one of those 50,000 people. The longer you're on the drug, the worse it's going to be. Better chance of you get organ failure.
Drugs is just too new, so there's no long-term data. The first GLP-1s from 2005 haven't shown major issues. Based on what we know today, it seems pretty clear that living with obesity is much unhealthier than living with drugs. And to be crystal clear, this doesn't mean that these drugs are for everyone. If you want to lose a couple of pounds but are otherwise healthy and have no chronic disease, these drugs were not made for you.
Exactly, just
You
exercise.
really should go the traditional route first before you start injecting drugs. Using it to
We
get to
we're
unhealthy
lazy,
amounts
though.
of low body fat is definitely not a great idea. In a nutshell, the best thing these drugs do is to remove the pressure of intense hunger and food noise, to give you a time window where you can change your habits. You still need to change your habits though.
Yes,
no
it's a
drug
temporary
can fix
fix.
that for you.
I'll admit when I'm wrong. This drug actually doesn't sound too terrible for people who needed it. Just kind of how it was before. If you need it, you need it. But if you don't need it, just don't use it, bro.
And opinion. A recent study modeled what would happen if millions of US adults who are obese or overweight got GLP-1 drugs for life. In just 2 years, about 50% of all obesity in the country would vanish. Over the years, it would prevent 26 million cases of diabetes, 13 million cases of heart disease, and 5.5 million premature deaths, which seems like a pretty good thing. And new drugs that are in final trials promise to work even better. Defeating obesity suddenly feels within reach. Right now, the biggest obstacles are actually supply shortages and high prices, which make these drugs inaccessible for many who actually need them.
This is the only thing I have an issue with, okay? And I'm gonna get a little conspiracy theorist here, okay? We're able to make this drug to stop obesity, okay? And we're flooding the market saying, take this drug to stop obesity. And again, I understand some people actually do need this drug, so it is important. We flood this market and say, take this drug instead of exercising. But things that we can't stop, like cancer, for some reason we've been working on for 30 plus years and we don't have a cure for cancer. It's all just a money marketing ploy that Big Pharma's in on. We can't stop cancer a safe route. However, we could just cure obesity, but we have a cure for it already. It's called diet and exercise. Now, again, some cases it's different. Like we do need this, yes, but it's called diet and exercise. But cases that we cannot stop, we just don't have cures for. We've been working on it. We just can't cure it. Get back to
Patents
this.
for semaglutide and tirzepatide will expire soon in many countries, and prices for them will collapse as a result. In the long run, increased production and plummeting costs.
Nah, like I'm walking with you for sure. There's so much things that I hear, bro, that I don't know.
Seem almost guaranteed.
I also am a firm believer that everything we ingest nowadays is what causes the majority of cancer. I believe that the chemicals they use to keep food fresh, the chemicals they use in stores, the pesticides they use, the additives, and all that stuff is what causes the majority of cancers, and the non-natural ingredients like sugars and whatnot.
Should we just inject obesity away? Well, for now at least, it seems that there are few downsides, although please don't listen to internet videos and talk to your doctor before you make any decisions for yourself. It's also important to remember that while these drugs are immensely helpful, they are not magic. They make a hard thing easier, but it still requires you to change your habits and put in some effort. They can gain us the time we need to fix the root causes of obesity. But it does seem the future just got a whole lot healthier.
He said that like 3 times. Anyway, that was the Ozempic.